Hi, welcome to Finance, Business and Investing. In this video, you will learn how Warren Buffett, the world's greatest investor and one of the world's wealthiest men, earned his first $1 million and how he went from 0 to 7 figures at the age of 31. You will comprehend the events, characteristics, and, of course, investments that were critical to Buffett's success at such a young age. But first, let me go on a rant. Some of the most popular videos on YouTube in the field of investing and personal finance these days are those that cover Buffett's most recent stock market moves. Whatever the world's greatest investor is doing to right the wrong, you should be doing as well. Let me explain. At Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett manages a portfolio of companies worth hundreds of billions of dollars. The difference between making money when managing such large sums and making money when your network ranges from $1,000 to $500,000 is like night and day. You play a completely different game that is actually rigged. Smaller investors prefer. Buffett would never act like this today. If he had $1,000 to $500,000, he would do something similar to what you will see in this video, and you should as well. Warren Buffett was 6 years old in 1936 when our story begins. Buffett was never given anything on a silver platter, according to The Grinder. He had two great entrepreneurial role models in his father Howard and grandfather Ernest, but he had to work for his own money. He made his first few dollars by selling chewing gum door to door. He purchased these packs from his grandfather's grocery store and earned 2 cents for each whole pack that he sold, with only 50 million packs remaining before achieving his first million. Buffett's door-to-door sales of Coca-Cola were another foray into high-margin retailing. He paid 20 cents for a pack of 6 and could resell it for 25 cents. Buffett once said as a child that if he didn't amass a fortune of at least $1,035,000, he would jump off Omaha's tallest building. We are fortunate that he eventually discovered other ways to make money than chewing gum and the Coca-Cola buffet. Buffett, the detective, was a truly curious child who was always looking for an informational edge, just like a great invested us. One interesting example is that he was a bottle cap collector. He gathered them in order to determine which soda was the most popular based on what he was selling. I suppose he came to the conclusion that it was Coke. Another amusing story is about him and a friend who started writing down license plate numbers. Of course, on a specific road in his hometown. Maha. This was the only road that led to the Douglas Country Bank. Warren stated that if the bank was ever robbed, the cops would require this information, and he and his friend would be the only ones with access to it. Was this an early attempt at market monopolization? Buffett the math with Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett loved statistics and numbers. For example, he discovered a massive database of historical composers and decided to use this data to determine whether it was worthwhile to be religious or not. How well he compared the lifespan of his composers, those who wrote about Christian worship, to all the others disappointed me. Buffett's math concluded that faithful composers were not rewarded with longer lives. Buffett. The reader. Warren Buffett spent a lot of his childhood at Omaha's Benson Library. He was reading everything he could get his hands on, and one day he came across a book that seemed especially useful. It was dubbed, 1,000 Ways to Make $1,000. 1,000 multiplied by itself. Buffett realized that if this book delivered on its promise, he'd have everything he needed to make his first $1 million faster than going door to door selling 50 million packs of chewing gum. The book delivered a significant message. Never before have the conditions been better for someone with little capital to start his own business, but you can't succeed unless you start. You must begin immediately. By the way, this book was first published in 1936. And it was correct in stating that it was easier than ever before to start a business without much capital at the time. But, in this day and age of software and the internet, it's at least 10 times easier than it was in the 1930s. But, as the book says, you can't succeed unless you start, so we've arrived at the point where Buffett decided to make his first move in the stock market, his first investment. Buffett had amassed approximately $120 as a result of his tireless efforts. Before you dismiss that, consider that $120 in 1941 is the equivalent of $2,125 today at the age of 11. Buffett understood the power of compound interest and was desperate to get ahead of the curve. He knew that once that snowball of wealth began to roll, nothing could stop it. Almost everyone in Buffett had now purchased his first few stock market shares. The company was called City Service, and he paid $114.75 for 3 preferred shares. The stock immediately fell. Warren had not only invested all of his own money, but he had also persuaded his oldest sister Doris to join him. Doris chose a buffet every day at school, reminding him that it was losing value. Buffett felt terrible because at one point he had the opportunity to cash out at a $5 profit for both of them, which he did. It didn't take long for the preferred City Service to skyrocket to $202 per person. Warren Buffett learned at least 2 important lessons from this experience. First, don't focus on the price you paid, and second, don't rush to make a small profit. Given that it took Buffett 5 years to amass his first $120. When he realized he was missing out on a $492 profit, you'd understand why he was upset. Buffett's driving force. Buffett, Howard. Warren's father was elected to the United States Congress to represent his state in Washington. As a result, the Buffetts relocated there in 1943. Warren was unhappy there and insisted on being returned to Omaha to live with his grandfather. On weekends, Ernest's wish was granted. Buffett worked at his grandfather's grocery store during this time. Buffett later stated, "I may have been the lowest paid person to ever work in the grocery business. I learned nothing except that I disliked hard work." Ernest, Warren's grandfather, was, by the way, hilarious. Ernest aspired to be an author in addition to running a grocery store. He had written a book titled, How to Run a Grocery Store and a Few Things I Learned About Fishing. Fortunately, Warren's father, a stockbroker and congressman, had a greater influence on him than Ernest Buffett. Buffett's reunion with Maha did not last long, as he was summoned back to his family in Washington in late 1943. He still didn't like it, but he needed money, so he began delivering multiple newspapers. Buffett demonstrated his determination to get ahead of the curve once more, and he was no longer earning pennies. By the end of 1944, at the age of 14, he was the proud owner of $1,000, approximately $14,795 in today's money. In addition, he filed his first tax return. We can see that Buffett was quickly gaining traction, increasing his income from newspaper routes from $42 in July 1944 to $86 in November and December of that same year, when he deducted his bicycle and wristwatch, which he was aware was questionable. That year, he paid a total of $7 in taxes. He was earning $175 per month from his newspaper routes by the age of 16. To put that figure in context, the average engineer in 1946 could expect to earn around $392 per month. Buffett, the bodybuilder, you clearly can't have everything in life, and what Buffett had in his wallet, he lacked in the girls' department, like many other boys before and after him. Yours truly is among them. He decided that the only way out of this rut was to begin a weightlifting routine inspired by Bob Hoffman and his magazine Strength and Health. Buffett purchased dumbbells and a barbell for the family basement. Buffett, the former doubling his money in a year, was disappointed and said that no matter how many curls he did, his homes didn't become much larger. At the age of 15, Buffett purchased a 40-acre farm in Nebraska for $1,200. In other words, he invested 60% of his net worth in this. With smaller sums of money, you can afford not to diversify as much, so the Buffett shared the profits with a tenant farmer who worked there, remembering the days at the grocery store. Buffett believed he had struck a goldmine here. He didn't have to do any of the physical labor. Warren sold the farm in 1950 for twice what he had paid for it. In the meantime, he had profited from the land for 5 years, which was impressive. Buffett, the entrepreneur, was struck by one of the book's ideas, 1,000 Ways to Make $1,000. This was the idea behind purchasing a scale and charging people to weigh themselves. Buffett was more impressed with the exponential growth that could occur if the money was reinvested in purchasing new scales rather than the weighing machines themselves. If purchasing the second scale took 30 days. With the profits from the first one, it only took 15 days to purchase the third one, 10 days to purchase the fourth, 7.5 days to purchase the fifth, and so on. Buffett never purchased any scales. Perhaps he decided that collecting the money would be too difficult, but he used the idea to form his first business partnership with his friend Don Danley. They made the decision to purchase pinball machines. This was the layout of the business plan. Warren would pay $25 for fixer-uppers on old pinball machines. They're worth $300 new. As a result, the old ones would have a much higher return on capital. Don Danley would be in charge of repairing these machines. The machines would then be placed in local barbershops, with profits split with the barber Warren, and Don would have to persuade the barbers that repairing pinball machines was a difficult art so that the barbers wouldn't start competing with the boys. Buffett and Danley quickly built up a small machine empire, and everyone in high school was aware of it at the time. For a while, Buffett and Danley were the cool kids. Buffett was able to sell the company for $1,200. Buffett's high school promise before graduating from high school. When Warren Buffett graduated from high school, he put future stockbroker Andre's picture in the yearly school book. Buffett and College Buffett attended Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania in 1947. He didn't want to go to college in the first place. He assumed it would only slow him down because he was already making enough money. Howard, on the other hand, wanted him to go, and he couldn't defy his father on such an important matter. Buffett's favorite class at Wharton was Industry 101, which covered the ins and outs of running a business in some of the largest industries at the time, including textiles, steel, and petroleum. Howard Buffett was not re-elected in 1948. As a result, the family relocated back to Omaha. Warren chose the University of Nebraska for his final year of college. There, he studied accounting, which he now refers to as the business language. To say Warren Buffett believes that any ambitious investor should learn to speak this language fluently at fraternity night parties would be an understatement. Buffett was extremely shy when discussing topics like girls and sex, and he disliked both drinking and small talk. He did draw attention, however, and could almost always be found sitting in a corner with a small crowd lecturing on topics such as stocks, money, business, and politics. Buffett had devoured every book on investing he could get his hands on until the age of 19. He read classics such as New Stock Market Profit Methods and Technical Analysis of Stock Market Trends. He'd been led astray several times while attempting to master the odds of technical analysis and candlestick charts. Yes, even Warren Buffett tried to be a trader at one point, and I suppose we all had to go through such a transformation. With a net worth of around $9,000, the wise investor. Buffett was probably the wealthiest of his friends, but he had amassed his fortune primarily through newspaper sales and entrepreneurial ventures, not through stock market investing. This was about to change. In 1949, the book was published by Benjamin Graham. Graham, the astute investor, had long been a successful value investor, the polar opposite of a technical trader and his fund. Since its inception in 1936, the Graham-Newman Corporation has consistently outperformed the Dow. The astute investor advanced three major ideas about the stock market, which Buffett immediately associated with intrinsic value. A stock is a component of a business, so it has intrinsic or real value. Mr. Marketplace. The stock market fluctuates between being overly pessimistic and overly optimistic. A true investor is not swayed by Mr. Market's volatile moods and sees rising and falling prices as opportunities, not as a source of information. Margin of safety. Stock market decisions must always be made with a built-in margin of safety. This means you should insist on purchasing stocks at a significant discount to their intrinsic or real business value. With this, something in Buffett clicked. Having seen the light, Warren did something that would prove to be one of his greatest assets in the long run. He began researching individual companies in order to create an internal and mental stock library. He studied the Moody's, Standard, and Poor's manuals. Page by page, I'm learning about hundreds of companies. He even read Moody's manuals twice. In addition, he looked at the Pink Sheets, a weekly publication that provided information about companies that were too small to be traded on a stock exchange. There was also the National Quotation Book, which was updated every 6 months and featured companies so small that they couldn't even make the Pink Sheets. This is also important for the small account investor. Smaller businesses must be taken into account. There is simply less competition there. Buffett, the A+ student throughout high school and secondary school, wasn't doing so well. He didn't exactly fail as a student, but he also didn't live up to his father Howard's expectations. Howard even threatened Warren with losing his newspaper roots if he did not improve his grades. That, of course, had an effect at one point. Howard wished Warren would not give up his primary source of income. Buffett had set his sights on business school after graduating from college. He was turned down because he was not deemed a future leader. This turned out to be one of the happiest misfortunes of Warren's life, as he discovered that his favorite investor, Benjamin Graham, was teaching at Columbia Business School Buffer, so he decided to try his luck there instead. When Buffett started at Columbia, despite the fact that his application arrived after the deadline, he was accepted without an interview. In 1950, he had $12,500 to his name, of which $500 was a scholarship and $2,000 was a combination of a graduation gift and a promise not to start smoking before his introductory course at Columbia Finance 111-112 Investment Management and Security Analysis. Buffett had already read the course material, Security Analysis, by Benjamin Graham and David Dodd. Warren was a favorite of David Dodd, who served as Graham's junior partner and taught the first course. Buffett knew the book better than the authors did. Benjamin Graham was more than just a Columbia University professor, he also was a fund partner. Some consider Graham-Newman to be the first hedge fund. One thing I find amusing is that Graham used to teach using real-world examples in his Columbia class, and in doing so, he was giving away a few of Graham's numerous best investment ideas. The students were then rushed to purchase these stocks, causing them to become too expensive and no longer worth acquiring. Jeremy Newman, the firm's other partner, was furious, but apparently Benjamin Graham thought they were already making enough money. So what does it matter? Nonetheless, over the course of its 20-year existence, Graham-Newman outperformed the Dow by an average of 2.5% per year. Finally, Buffett had found teachers who were teaching him something interesting and useful. While his grades in secondary and high school were mostly B's, C's, and D's, he was the first person ever to receive an A+ in one of Benjamin Graham's courses. Buffett was one of the best students who ever took the course. During his time at Columbia, he may or may not have been the insurance king. Warren Buffett discovered that Benjamin Graham was the chairman of Governmental Employees Insurance Company. I'm not sure if it was Buffett's detective skills that revealed this, or if Graham simply spilled the beans in claws. Does this sound familiar? This is the company that was later renamed Geico and became Warren Buffett's greatest investment of all time in terms of essential returns on his 1976 to 1980 purchases. Geico was transformed into a 1,000-bagger for the Buffett. Buffett's career took a significant step forward on a Saturday morning in January 1951, when he decided to travel from Columbia in New York to Geico's headquarters in Washington. He wanted to learn more about the company and the insurance industry in general. Buffett simply went to the office and knocked on its doors, where he met Laura Meir Davidson, an assistant to the company's president. After realizing that Buffett was a unique young man who had meticulously prepared for this meeting, Davidson decided to give Buffett 4 hours of his time rather than the originally planned 5 minutes. Buffett simply kept asking questions and soon learned about what's important in the insurance industry, why Geico was gaining market share, and who the company's competitors were. By the end of 1951, Buffett had decided to place a large wager. Geico accounted for 65% of Buffett's net worth. In 1952, the stock rose by 50%, prompting Buffett to sell and invest in another insurer, Western Insurance Securities, which was trading at a P/E a little more than 1. Buffett mentions a P/E ratio that piqued my interest. Geico was trading at around 8 times earnings at the time. Buffett, on the other hand, would return for more. Later Buffett and Susie. Buffett had some difficulties with girls up until this point in his life, and he was disappointed to see that girls didn't want to hear about Benjamin Graham or concepts like Mr. Market and the margin of safety. I know that field, but in the summer of 1950, his younger sister Roberta set him up on a date with a girl named Susan or Susie Thompson. The problem was that Susie was already in a relationship with a man named Milton Brown. Fortunately for Buffett, Susie's father, Bill Thompson, was not a fan of Milton Guy. Buffett, on the other hand, began dating Susie's father almost as much as the girl herself, which proved to be a successful strategy. Buffett and Susie married in September 1951. Buffett believes this was partly due to Bill Thompson's influence. It was 2 against 1. He later stated about the situation that Warren and Susie married in April 1952, and Buffett allegedly spent 6% of his net worth on a wedding ring. Buffett has said that this was the best investment of his life, so apparently there are times when not being so damn frugal on the cross-country court trip, which was their honeymoon, pays off. Buffett had packed his car with books, including his mistress, the Moody's manuals. Buffett and Susie bought their first home together in 1958. They had been renting and living with their parents up until that point. They paid $31,500 for the house, and Buffett immediately dubbed it Buffett's Folly. He knew that he could earn far better returns in the stock market than he could ever hope for from housing price appreciation. Consider that Buffett thought this was a stupid move, despite the fact that the house only represented 10% of his net worth at the time, not 500% as it does for most people. Buffett, the stockbroker after graduating from Columbia Business School in 1951, Buffett wanted to work for his favorite teacher, investor, and teacher, Benjamin Graham. He even offered to take the job for free. However, there was still some prejudice against Jews at the time, perhaps especially on Wall Street. As a result, Graham, who was born into a Jewish family, decided to hire only Jews. Buffett returned to Omaha in 1951 to work at his father's brokerage firm. He wasn't thrilled with his new position. You have to sell as a broker, and Buffett felt like he was selling prescriptions. He was paid based on turnover rather than how good his tips were. In other words, he wasn't interested in curing his patients in order to sell them as many pills as possible. He also believed he was not receiving the respect he deserved from his clients, and who could blame them? Not every 21-year-old who works at their father's brokerage firm is a prodigy. Buffett and public speaking. Buffett completed a Dale Carnegie speaking course in January 1952. He still has the certificate on his wall in his Omaha office and has said about the course, "That's the most important degree that I have." Long before the course, Buffett had read Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and he knew that if he were going to get anywhere in this world, he needed to learn how to win friends and influence people. To practice his skills, he would need to learn how to deal with people and how to speak well in front of an audience. He began teaching an evening course in personal finance investing at the University of Nebraska. He enjoyed imitating his idol, Benjamin Graham Buffett, who taught until 1958, I believe. Despite teaching at 3 different universities during this time period in 1956, he was only teaching an investment analysis class for men. I understand where Buffett came from, but I'm glad to hear that he later decided to expand to teach investing for women as well. From 1951 to 1950, Buffett sent stock tips to Graham Newman and visited their office on occasion. Graham changed his mind about Buffett's employment after 3 years. But, in the end, Warren became Graham Newman's first non-Jewish employee. Buffett and his dream job. Buffett arrived in New York in August 1950, a month before his actual start date, to work at the Graham Newman office. His monthly salary was $1,000. Through his wits and unwavering dedication, he quickly became the company's golden boy. In 1956, he was offered to take over the fund when Graham decided to retire, and when he declined, Graham Newman decided to close down, leaving Graham Buffett to go his own way. At the age of 26, Buffett formed his first partnerships. Buffett had amassed approximately $174,000 and had returned to Omaha after spending 2 years in New York. He mentioned retiring because he knew his family could live on around $12,000 per year. Buffett apparently believed that investing and managing a few other people's money equaled retirement, because that's exactly what he did. Buffett formed Buffett Associates Limited, an investment partnership similar to Graham Newman, on May 5, 1956, when he was 25 years old. It was much smaller, with only 7 partners among family and friends. Buffett was the general partner, which meant he was in command. The 7 limited partners had each contributed $105,000. Buffett himself contributed only $100,000. There is some conflicting data regarding the partnership's fees, and it appears that a few of Buffett's most popular books got this wrong. The agreement did not state that the limited partners would be guaranteed 4% interest and that Buffett and the partners would split the profits. As stated in Buffett's partnership letter in July 1961, there were various deals to choose from during the period when he operated multiple partnerships between 1956 and 1961. He merged all of these separate partnerships into a single larger one in 1962. According to Berkshire Hathaway's annual shareholder meeting in 2000, the deal was a 6% interest with Buffett receiving 1/4 of all profits. When we combined them, we decided on a 6% preferential with 1/4 of the profits above that. Nobody was guaranteed anything on him with a carryover of all deficiencies. There were a few more intriguing rules. The limited partners could essentially only add or withdraw money once a year, in December. The Buffett didn't want people coming in and out of the partnership, and he wasn't going to tell them what he invested in. Because of the secrecy, Buffett did not want people to bid up the prices of the stocks he was interested in. Some Omaha residents suspected Buffett of running a Ponzi scheme. Those who were skeptical of Buffett's abilities and trustworthiness missed out between 1957 and 1961. Warren outperformed the Dow Jones Industrial Average by up to 16% per year, or a compounded 177%. As a result, the limited partners outperformed the index by an average of 10.2% per year. Buffett's competencies as an asset manager received increased attention, and by the end of 1961, he managed a total of 10 different partnerships, including one with his father, Buffett and the cigar butts. So how did he achieve these kinds of returns? At Columbia Grammar, Buffett was taught an investing strategy known as buying cigar butts. Such stocks were soggy, unloved, and frequently discarded, but they were usually good for at least one more puff. Using analogies, the cigar butt strategy meant buying really cheap companies. Their stocks were typically trading at extremely low price-to-earnings ratios or at extremely low prices relative to cash and assets. When the stocks lit up and this represented the final puff, these mispricings would often correct themselves in a few months or perhaps a year or two. Buffett would then sell the company and purchase something less expensive. Buffett was sifting through resources like the previously mentioned Moody's manuals, Pink Sheets, and the National Quotation Book for smaller companies, which the stock market had forgotten about. Their market capitalizations were frequently between $1 and $10 million, which equated to $8 to $80 million. It wasn't unusual for the liquidity in these companies to be so thin that Buffett had to meet with shareholders in person to negotiate prices. Sanborn Mapp and Dempster Mill were two important cigar butts that Warren Buffett purchased early in his career. Sanborn Mapp was a company that delivered detailed information of different structures in cities all over the United States, showing, among other things, the diameter of war domains, underlying streets, the location of fire hydrants, and the composition of roofs information, which was of interest to a fire insurance company. Buffett contributed 35% of his partnership funds between 1958 and 1960. A share of the company could be purchased for $45. While its balance sheet contained $65 in blue-chip securities. The business wasn't doing well because insurance companies were experimenting with new underwriting techniques, but it was still cash flow positive and paid a dividend. And at this price, you essentially got the Sanborn Company for free. In addition, you were getting $20 worth of blue-chip stock, which was a good deal, and Buffett profited about 50% on this investment. Dempster Mill Manufacturing produced farm implements and water systems for 2 years. Buffett began purchasing shares in 1956, though the majority of them were purchased in 1961, when the company was selling at $30 per share and breaking even on profits. It used to make a lot of money, but not anymore. Buffett was salivating because the company's book value was $75 per share. He realized that this value could be unlocked. The current share price allows for excellent returns. Buffett Associates purchased 73% of the company at an average price of $28 per share and used approximately 21% of its assets to seize control of the company and sell off assets to make it more efficient. Buffett eventually sold them to an acquirer in 1963 for $80 per share, representing an 185% return. If you want a screen for similar companies today, I recommend using either Joel Greenblatt's magic formula to be as Carlyle's acquirer's multiple or Benjamin Graham's net stocks. In the description of this one, I will link to 3 videos in which I explain these strategies. Buffett completely focused. Buffett was clearly preoccupied with the accumulation of wealth. He didn't spend much time with his children, and when he did, he was often mentally on vacation in California. He took the kids to Disneyland and sat on a bench reading while they ran around and had a great time at their own buffet. It's also clear that Susie sustained Buffett both emotionally and practically in their household. Her husband didn't have many needs, but she made sure they were met. A light bulb in his reading lamp, some Pepsi in the fridge. Yes, I was buffeted and then switched to Coke. However, there was meat and potatoes for dinner, ice cream in the freezer, and everything else that a household requires to function. At a local dinner party, Warren Buffett met Charlie Munger, a Los Angeles lawyer and book with legs. The two had a great intellectual connection. The rest, as they say, is history. Munger is the vice chairman of Warren Buffett's company, Berkshire Hathaway, and has been since 1978. Prior to meeting Charlie Munger, Buffett concentrated his investments in mediocre companies trading at low prices. After being persuaded by Munger, he began to focus on great companies at reasonable prices. While both strategies are valid, Graham's approach is better suited to smaller capital investors, whereas Munger's approach is more all-around. Buffett became a millionaire by January 1962. Buffett had a total of 10 different partnerships, or 11 if you include the one he had with his father. Charlie Munger assisted Buffett in finding companies such as See's Candies and Coca-Cola. These collaborations were with various groups of people, and Buffett has now decided to combine them into a single larger one. Buffett Limited Partnership. He had about $1,025,000 in cash. Buffett had become a millionaire. Here's the quickest recap. Grinding, reading, delivering newspapers, starting businesses, learning about value investing, going to business school, working for his idol and role model, leveraging other people's money, always looking for cheap companies to invest in, and most importantly, remaining completely focused. Buffett was 31 years old when he became a millionaire.